What if I told you that success is the seed of failure? That the very thing making companies unstoppable is the same thing that will destroy them? Picture a mighty oak tree, towering, unshaken, its roots deep in the soil of past victories. Then one day, a tiny sprout appears nearby, barely noticeable. It's weak, fragile, unthreatening. The oak keeps growing, feeding its strongest branches, stretching toward the sky, unaware that the sprout, small, scrappy, and adaptable, will one day overshadow it completely. This is the paradox of innovation. The businesses that dominate today, the ones with the best customers, the smartest leaders, and the most resources, are often the first to fall when the ground shifts beneath them. And it's not because they're reckless, it's because they're too good at what they do. In The Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton Christensen dismantles everything we think we know about progress, revealing why the greatest companies, the Kodaks, the Nokias, the Blockbusters of the world, don't die from incompetence. They die because they follow the rules of success too well. So why do they fail? And more importantly, how can you spot the next disruption before it's too late? Every great empire, at its peak, believes it will last forever. Rome, the British Empire, General Motors, IBM, Nokia, titans that once shaped the world, until one day they didn't. But their downfall wasn't the result of a single catastrophic event. No invasion, no economic collapse. It was something far more insidious, an invisible shift they failed to recognize until it was too late. This is the innovator's dilemma. At its core, it's the paradox that the very decisions that make a company successful in the present are the same ones that guarantee its failure in the future. Let's break it down. Big companies, market leaders, are driven by one thing: serving their best customers. They listen carefully, refine their products, improve efficiency, and maximize profits. That's what good businesses do. But then out of nowhere, something new appears. A disruptive technology, a product that seems worse, underpowered, niche, not even a threat. When digital cameras first emerged, Kodak dismissed them. Too low quality, too expensive, a toy for hobbyists. They focused on perfecting film. When Netflix started mailing DVDs, Blockbuster laughed. Streaming, the internet was too slow. Late fees were a goldmine. When Apple introduced the iPhone, BlackBerry executives scoffed. No physical keyboard, business users would never take it seriously. And yet, every one of those underdogs, the ignored, the underestimated, eventually flipped the game. Not because they were better at first, but because they played by a different set of rules. See, traditional companies optimize for sustaining innovation, incremental improvements to what already works. But disruptors introduce disruptive innovation, technology that starts off weak yet grows exponentially. The dilemma? Market leaders can't afford to chase disruption. They're trapped by their own success. Their best customers don't want a worse product, and executives aren't rewarded for gambling on unproven ideas. So they double down. They refine, optimize, invest in what's safe. Until one day, disruption isn't weak anymore. It's faster, cheaper, more accessible, and suddenly the empire crumbles. This isn't just theory, it's a pattern, and it's happening right now. The only question is, who's next? Innovation isn't just about making something new, it's about making something better. But here's the catch. Better means different things to different people. If you ask a CEO of a billion-dollar company what innovation looks like, they'll probably point to their latest upgrade: a faster chip, a sleeker design, a bigger screen. That's what we call sustaining innovation, incremental improvements that keep existing customers happy. It's predictable, it's safe, it's exactly what companies like Nokia, Sony, and General Motors spent decades perfecting. And for a while, it works. But there's another kind of innovation, one that doesn't start by asking, how do we make this better? But instead, who are we ignoring? That's disruptive innovation, and it's a completely different game. Disruptive innovations start small, often in overlooked markets where established companies don't bother to compete. They look inferior at first, underpowered, niche, sometimes even laughable. Think about the first personal computers. Mainframe giants like IBM dismissed them as toys for hobbyists. Real businesses, they believed, would always need massive, expensive machines. Or consider Toyota in the 1960s. The American car market was dominated by Ford and GM, who focused on making bigger, more powerful vehicles for their loyal customers. Toyota? They started with cheap, fuel-efficient cars. appealing to people that the big players didn't even consider customers. At first, these disruptors didn't compete directly. They served a different audience, a smaller one. But here's the secret. Disruptive innovations don't stay small. Over time, they improve, they refine, they climb the market ladder, until one day they're not the underdog anymore. They're the new standard. PCs replaced mainframes, Toyota overtook GM, Netflix crushed Blockbuster, and the market leaders, they never saw it coming because they were too focused on perfecting what already existed. So here's the question. Are we living through another wave of disruption right now? Look at AI, look at automation, look at decentralized finance. They're raw, imperfect, maybe even laughable to some. But history tells us one thing: what looks weak today might just own the future. Success is a trap. The bigger a company gets, the harder it is to see beyond what's working right now. Think about it. Why would a company that dominates its industry, rakes in billions, and has a loyal customer base ever choose to gamble on something new, especially when that new thing looks worse? This is exactly why the world's most successful companies, the ones with the smartest executives and the deepest pockets, consistently fail to see disruption coming. Not because they're reckless, not because they don't see the technology, but because they do everything right. And that's the problem. Every business operates under one golden rule: serve your best customers first. If you're Apple, you focus on making better iPhones. If you're BMW, you make luxury cars even more luxurious. If you're Microsoft in the 90s, you make Windows dominate every office in the world. So when something new shows up, something weaker, cheaper, or targeted at an audience that isn't their core customer, why would they care? When Airbnb launched, hotel chains dismissed it. Their high-paying customers wanted 5-star service, not some random person's couch. When Wikipedia emerged, Encyclopedia Britannica laughed. A free, user-edited website could never match their expert-written volumes. But the disruptors weren't trying to compete on their terms. They were building something different, something that their customers didn't yet care about, but eventually would. Kodak didn't ignore digital cameras because they were blind. They invented the digital camera, but they shelved it. Why? Because early digital images were garbage compared to high-quality film. Blockbuster didn't refuse to buy Netflix because they were out of touch. They saw it, but at the time, mailing DVDs wasn't nearly as profitable as running physical stores. The problem? Disruptive innovations always start worse. Early electric cars had terrible range and high costs. Early smartphones were slow and lacked apps. Early AI models made laughable mistakes. But here's what big companies forget. Disruptors don't have to be better today. They just have to improve faster than you expect. The scariest part of disruption? Even when big companies do see it coming, they often can't do anything about it. Blockbuster couldn't shift to streaming overnight because their entire business model depended on late fees. Newspapers saw digital media coming, but their revenue was locked into print advertising. Canon and Nikon saw smartphones eating into their camera sales, but how could they compete with a product people already carried in their pocket? Even if the leadership wants to pivot, they're trapped. Investors expect profits now. Shareholders punish risk. Every decision is measured by its impact on the next quarterly earnings report. So they double down on what's working. They refine, they optimize, they protect their core business, until one day their customers leave. By the time a disruptive technology is good enough to compete, it's already too late. Kodak tried to jump into digital after the fact. It failed. BlackBerry rushed to make touchscreens once the iPhone took over. It failed. Blockbuster finally launched a streaming service. Too little, too late. The lesson? The moment a disruptive technology looks like a joke is the moment you should start paying attention. So what's being ignored right now? AI replacing creative jobs? Decentralized finance dismantling banking? Autonomous vehicles wiping out trucking and ride-sharing? The next disruption is already here. The only question is, who's about to make the biggest mistake of their lives? Disruption doesn't happen overnight. It's not a revolution, it's an infection. A small, insignificant force creeping through the cracks of an industry growing stronger while no one's paying attention. Then one day, the entire system collapses. That's how disruptors take over. Not by going head-to-head with industry giants from day one, but by playing an entirely different game. Here's how it happens. Disruptors never attack the market leader directly. They start small, in places that big companies have no incentive to serve. Amazon didn't begin by challenging Walmart. It started by selling books online to tech nerds. Netflix didn't take on Hollywood. It mailed DVDs to movie buffs who didn't mind waiting. Tesla didn't compete with Toyota. It built expensive electric sports cars for rich environmentalists. These were tiny markets, niche, unimportant, and that's exactly why the incumbents ignored them. Kodak didn't fight digital cameras because film was still king. Hotels didn't challenge Airbnb because no business traveler would ever book a stranger's home. IBM didn't care about personal computers because real companies used mainframes. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. The most dangerous thing about disruptive technologies isn't where they start, it's how fast they evolve. The first digital cameras were garbage, but they got better, fast. The first electric cars had terrible range, but they improved, fast. The first AI chatbots were a joke, but now they're writing code, analyzing data, and replacing human workers faster than anyone predicted. Meanwhile, incumbents are trapped. They can't move fast because their entire business model depends on the old technology. Nokia couldn't pivot to touchscreens without gutting their hardware business. Blockbuster couldn't embrace streaming without killing their rental stores. BlackBerry couldn't drop keyboards without alienating their core customers. So they hesitated. They delayed. They waited for the disruptor to prove itself. By the time it did, they were already dead. At first, disruptors don't compete for premium customers. They take the scraps. The people big companies don't even want to serve. But as they get better, they climb. Netflix started with DVD rentals, then launched streaming, then produced original content. Now they're the new Hollywood. Amazon started with books, then expanded to retail, then AWS. Now they own the internet. Tesla started with high-end EVs, then made mass-market models. Now they're leading the auto industry. This is the moment where big companies finally wake up. But by then, it's checkmate, because the disruptor isn't a scrappy underdog anymore. They've eaten the low end, refined their product, and are now coming for the core customers. And the old giants? They're left with an outdated model, shrinking profits, and no way to fight back. Disruption always follows the same pattern. The disruptor starts small and weak. They improve rapidly. They steal the low end. They move up market. The old industry collapses. By the time everyone sees what's happening, the new technology isn't an alternative anymore. It's the standard. Nobody rents movies. Nobody buys CDs. Nobody develops film. And the companies that once ruled the world, they're nothing but history lessons. This isn't just a cycle, it's a law. And the scariest part? It's happening right now. AI, blockchain, automation, Web3. These aren't just buzzwords, they're disruptors. They're following the same pattern that destroyed Kodak, Blockbuster, and Nokia. The only question left is who's next? If history has taught us one thing, it's this: disruption is inevitable. It doesn't care how big you are. It doesn't care how much money you've made. It doesn't care how many customers love you today. Kodak had a 90% market share, gone. Blockbuster had 9,000 stores, gone. BlackBerry owned business communication, gone. But here's the thing. Disruption isn't a death sentence. Companies don't fail because disruption happens. They fail because they refuse to adapt. So how do you survive? How do you beat the innovator's dilemma? The biggest mistake companies make: they defend their current profits instead of building their future. Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for $50 million. Instead, they kept pushing rentals and late fees. Kodak invented the digital camera, but instead of investing in it, they buried it to protect film sales. Newspapers saw the internet coming, but instead of going digital, they clung to print ads. Lesson? The moment a disruptive technology appears, your job isn't to fight it, it's to own it. Even if it means cannibalizing your own business, because if you don't, someone else will. Disruption can't be managed from within the old system. It needs a separate space, free from the pressures of existing customers, quarterly earnings, and internal politics. That's why Google has X, a division dedicated to moonshot ideas like self-driving cars and AI. That's why Amazon built AWS, which started as an internal tool and is now a trillion-dollar business. That's why Apple developed the iPhone in secret, because the iPod team never would have killed their best-selling product. If you want to innovate, you need to separate the disruptors from the incumbents. Give them autonomy, different incentives, and a different mission. If you try to make disruption fit into your existing structure, you'll kill it before it even starts. The customers you serve today aren't necessarily the customers you'll need tomorrow. IBM dominated with mainframes, but instead of waiting for the PC revolution to wipe them out, they shifted to enterprise software and services. That's why they're still here. Apple could have just kept making better iPods, but Steve Jobs saw what was coming and built the iPhone before someone else did. Netflix could have stuck with DVDs, but Reed Hastings knew streaming was inevitable, so they burned the boats and went all in. Lesson? The best companies don't just respond to disruption, they anticipate it. If you wait until a disruptive technology is good enough to take seriously, you've already lost. If your industry hasn't been disrupted yet, it's only a matter of time. Do you want to be Blockbuster or Netflix, Kodak or Apple, BlackBerry or Tesla? Every industry at some point will face its innovator's dilemma. The question isn't if, it's when. The companies that survive are the ones that aren't afraid to burn their old business models to the ground and rebuild before it's too late. So here's the final test. Would you rather kill your own product or wait for someone else to do it for you? Because one way or another, it's going to happen.